our Chuck Polak, Natural Resources Policy Advisor to Governor Dempsey, Carol Ward, who is our Deputy Assistant Director for Planning and Permitting, Zach Richards, Council Staff, and Deputy Director Clint Chandler. We also have virtually Chief Legal Counsel Ken Selinsky and Natalie Max, Management Plan AMA Director. So to do the roll, I'm going to ask Zach and Nicole to roll the council alphabetically. Please be prepared to unmute yourself and acknowledge that you are present. So Zach, can you poll the roll, please?
Yes, sir. So as I go through the list, you need to say here or give your introduction of what group you'll be representing. Bass. Oh, forgot we have a different one. Lisa Atkins.
Present. State Land Department.
Thank you. Doug Brown.
This is Doug Brown on behalf of David Brown.
Thank you. Ms. A.L. Cabrera.
Good morning, representing the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality.
Chris Camacho. Ted Cook.
Ted Cook here for Central Arizona Project.
Maria Daggar.
Good morning, this is Jay Conkus, alternate for Maria Daggar, representing the Intertribal Association of Arizona.
Thank you, sir. Ron Dova.
Good morning, Ron Dova, representing the Northern Arizona Municipal Water Reusers Association.
Thank you. Doug Dunham.
Doug Dunham here representing EPCOR Water.
Doug. Sandy Favorites.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sandy Favorites representing Freeport.
Representative Charlene Fernandez. Okay, Kathleen Fair. Grady Damage.
Here.
Bill Garfield.
Good morning, Bill Garfield representing the Arizona Water Company.
Patrick Graham.
Morning, Scott Deeney on behalf of Patrick Graham for the Nature Conservancy.
Thanks, Scott. Representative Gail Griffin.
Good morning, Representative Gail Griffin, Arizona House of Representatives.
Thank you. Glenn Hamer.
Good morning, Glenn Hammer, Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Thank you. Spencer Camp. Jamie Kelly. Senator Steny Kerr. John Kamik.
Morning, everybody. John Kamik, representing Southern Arizona Water Users Association.
Cheryl Lombard.
Cheryl Lombard, Dolly Partnership.
Edward Maxwell. Stephen Miller. Wade Noble.
Wade Noble, representing Yuma County Agriculture Water Coalition.
Virginia O'Connell.
Good morning, Virginia O'Connell, Arizona Water Banking Authority.
Senator Lisa Otondo.
Good morning, Senator Liso Tondo, the Arizona Senate. Thank you.
Dennis Patch. Chuck's with us. Sarah Porter.
Sarah Porter from the Kyle Center for Water Policy here.
Philip Richards.
Good morning, Philip Richards with ATS.
Dave Roberts.
Good morning, Dave Roberts on behalf of Fall River Project.
Governor Lewis. Kevin Rogers. Stephanie Smallhouse.
Good morning, Stephanie Smallhouse, representing Arizona Farm Bureau.
Mark Smith. Craig Sullivan.
Good morning, Craig Sullivan with the County Supervisors Association.
Warren Tenney.
Good morning, Warren Teddy with the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association.
Tim Tamir.
Good morning, Tim Tomier with the City of Tucson.
Philip Townsend.
Phil Townsend, Sunland Chemical, Yuma, Arizona.
Make sure I get this one right. Chris Udall.
Yes, I'm here representing the Agribusiness and Water Council of Arizona. Thanks.
You bet. That concludes the roll call. Back to you, Director. Yeah, I think I saw him on the board.
So we have seen also Stephen Miller, and I saw Jamie Kelly's name pop up as well. We'll try to bear with us a little bit here, but some of it I think might be pausing long enough to let people unmute at one of our virtual world challenges. If there are any other elected officials with us today, I want to pause and allow them to unmute themselves and introduce themselves. So we'll give a pause, and if you are with us, please unmute. We can recognize you.
Rusty Powers, House of Representatives.
Morning, Speaker.
Good morning, sir.
Tina Kerr, Arizona Senate.
Morning, Senator. We called roll and we missed you, I guess.
Steve Miller, Pinell County Supervisor.
Yep.
Did you get that?
Oh, you were one of the first ones on.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other elected officials? Hearing none, we'll move on.
This is Pat Saha. I'm on.
Oh, tried to ask. You missed you earlier in the roll call, but you're number one, so. Zach, can you put the agenda back up? So you all should have received by email the agenda for today. And I won't go through it item by item, but I'll leave it there for a split second while we introduce the first agenda item, which will be committee updates. And our first update is from Warren Tenney, co-chair of the post-2025 AMA committee. So Warren, if you could go ahead and give your presentation, we'll get your slides here.
Well, good morning again. It's good to see and hear everyone at the water meeting via WebEx. I'll be giving an update about the post-2025 AMA committee, but I want to acknowledge my fellow committee co-chair, Tim Tomier, and his support to keep our committee moving forward. Let's see. I'll let you go ahead and put a slide up.
Say next slide, we want to move forward for you.
Will do. Thank you. Our committee has been working to define specific challenges in the AMAs with the objective to identify and recommend potential solutions to you, the Governor's Water Council. We plan to put together a package of issues to present to you by the end of the year so that we can get your agreement that these are challenges the committee needs to further tackle and develop solutions and strategies. Next slide. Since being formed last year, the committee has met 5 times. As we reported to you back in March, the committee had begun looking at 3 specific issues to understand why and how they are challenges. Those 3 issues are unreplenished groundwater pumping, the proliferation of exempt wells, and the hydrologic disconnect between recharge and recovery. To best document these issues, we drafted papers to define the issue in a succinct, straightforward way so that the Governor's Water Council and anyone else interested will understand the issue and the need to find a solution or strategy to address it. We are intentionally calling these papers issue briefs. We want them to be a brief, objective overview, not a dissertation. With the COVID-19 situation keeping us from meeting in person but not wanting to delay any progress, we proceeded with drafting issue briefs on these 3 subjects, distributed them to the committee members for their feedback and comments, and then met virtually in May to discuss the 3 issue briefs. We met again in August to begin discussion of a 4th issue, and we will meet again on October 8th. So I'd like to give a quick review on those 3 issue briefs. Next slide, please. The first one deals with hydrologic disconnect. This is when recharge can happen in one part of the AMA and recovery can take place in another part of the AMA. This also applies with groundwater pumping occurring in one part of the AMA and replenishment by the CAGRD can be done somewhere else. This practice is legally permitted under statute because we currently look at managing the AMA as a whole. This hydrologic disconnect has long been recognized as having the potential to create or worsen localized groundwater depletion, especially in the future during shortages when cities and others begin to recover their long-term storage credits from areas that are different than where the water had been stored. And also, as the CAGRD continues to add obligations to replenish groundwater that was pumped. While more work needs to be done to understand the scale of the issue today, there is little question that a large and persistent disconnect between recharge and recovery could lead to localized aquifer hotspots. Next slide. Based on data from ADWR, exempt wells have the potential to contribute to groundwater overdraft in the Prescott AMA more so than any other AMA. So the committee decided to focus on exempt wells in the Prescott AMA, where the pumping from exempt wells represents approximately 11% of the total water demand in that AMA. In comparison, exempt wells in the Phoenix AMA is estimated at less than 1% of just municipal water use. ADWR calculates that the potential pumping capacity of the exempt wells in the Prescott AMA could total over 150,000 acre-feet per year. Even if we just assumed a quarter of that capacity, it would almost double the current water usage in the Prescott AMA. All this leads to various concerns about the impacts to groundwater from the proliferation of exempt wells. This issue also sheds light on the overall management approach in the Prescott AMA and its ability to meet its management goals. Next slide, please. This third issue is unreplenished groundwater withdrawal. Unreplenished groundwater pumping refers to groundwater that is legally withdrawn without the requirement or obligation to artificially replenish or replace the volume of water pumped. This issue brief summarizes the different kinds of groundwater pumping that are allowed in the agricultural, industrial, and municipal sectors. The issue brief breaks out the average annual unreplenished groundwater demand between 2012 and 2016 within each AMA and attributed to the different sectors. For example, in the Phoenix AMA, there is an average of over 900,000 acre-feet annually of unreplenished groundwater pumping. It is a challenge to address this residual pumping, since for the past 40 years, each water use sector has become accustomed to utilizing various types of allowable groundwater. We feel it is important to shed light on the different sources of unreplenished withdrawals, to what extent this pumping is taking place in the AMAs, and what the impact of that pumping may be. By being fully aware of and understanding this issue, we can develop strategies and incentives to reduce those withdrawals and mitigate the impacts of this unreplenished pumping in order to reach the various AMA goals. Next slide. So, at our last meeting, which was on August 26th, we decided to tackle how to further identify the issues related to the CAGRD. Tim and I wanted the committee to have a constructive discussion to define what the issue is in regard to the CAGRD, since the CAGRD has been on our initial list of issues. We weren't certain about the best approach, since we know that the CAGRD can generate strong opinions. So we decided to work with ADWR and CAGRD staff on how we could take a more holistic approach, and we decided to look at the CAGRD from the perspective of its role within the Assured Water Supply Program and what that will look like after 2025. At the committee meeting, ADWR gave an overview to explain how key provisions of the Assured Water Supply Program connect with the CAGRD. We then asked 4 questions of the committee to generate discussion, which was productive. We are taking the feedback and input received from that meeting, starting to outline an issue brief and preparing for a follow-up discussion at our next meeting on October 8th. Next slide. So here are the issues that the committee has identified. As you can see, the 3 issue briefs I just reviewed are at the top of the list. These 3 issue briefs can be found on ADWR's website under the Governor's Water Council information. We are not sure if we will cover all the remaining issues, but Tim and I hope before the Council's December meeting, the committee can at least discuss some of the logistical issues related to ADWR's management structure for the AMA. For example, the issue that the statutes are not clear about ADWR continuing to put together 10-year management plans after 2025. Last slide. Our intention is to give a more formal overview in December about each issue that we have put together an issue brief. At the December meeting, we hope to have general agreement on those issues from the Council so that the committee can then develop strategies and solutions for those issues. The whole purpose of looking at issues beyond 2025 is so that we are continually improving water management in the AMAs. We are glad that the Council feels this is an important objective, because we know that Arizona's future successes depends upon how well we continue to plan and manage our water today. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Are there any comments or questions from any of the council members regarding Warren's presentation? So hearing none, I will just weigh in and say that the list of challenges that Warren presented, I think, has been before us as water managers for many, many years. I know we've had some very lively debates about probably every one of those issues on that list. And so good luck, Warren and Tim, your committee, and taking on the challenge.
Chairman Bishaki.
Visiting those issues. Yes, I'm hearing somebody.
This is Rusty.
Mr. Bowers, yes, go ahead.
Warren, did you talk about water usage by exempt wells in the Prescott AMA?
Yes, I did.
So, as I heard it, the Prescott AMA exempt well use was the highest by percentage of total volume of any of the AMAs. Was that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And in regards to when looking at exempt wells, there's a larger issue created in the Prescott AMA by exempt wells than what you find in other AMAs.
But it's a given that you have to work on the 35 gallon a minute capacity, because we really don't know how much they're pulling, but they have the capacity of exercising that level of influence or impact. Would that be correct?
That is correct, and that was why I mentioned that even if you took that full capacity and even just took a quarter of that, it would still be a lot. It would still double the usage up there. And again, we're not proposing at this time any solution. We're just trying to point out that this is an issue that we should, as a council, work on to see if we can come up with a strategy to address it.
I understand. I understand the point. A parallel point, though. So if that was the percentage of capacity that could be influencing the total water usage in that AMA, whereas in Phoenix you'd have more municipal extraction and agricultural extraction perhaps in the AMA, but as far as the overall usage versus capacity, is it possible that the capacity, let's talk about capacity of exempt wells in a Phoenix AMA by total gallons could also be a quite large amount? How would it relate to gallons of usage against the possible gallons of usage in other AMAs? Do we have any idea?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we did have a presentation from DWR that provided that information.
Yeah, I watched it, and I think this is an important subject. In essence, it's kind of like a very rough parallel of public district schools and public charter schools. That for whatever dissatisfaction or reason, some people pull their kids from a public district and go charter. Like someone might not use municipal water, but use an exempt well as a water source. And I'm just wondering the overall dynamics of usage and the vote of people who do it and what that might represent in the future, just kind of as an ancillary thought. Okay, that was it. Thanks, Warren.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, we will work with Warren to try to get some of the data to him to answer your questions, and at that point, we'll also send it to you if that works for you.
That'd be great. Thank you, Tom, very much.
Sure thing. So I do before, sorry, someone else weighing in? Yes. So before we leave this issue, since it does have the name AMA in it, I wanted to make everyone aware, if you're not already, that our AMA director, Einar Henningsen, has left the department to go back to Israel. And we have promoted two internal folks, Natalie Mass and Kyle Miller, to take over the duties. Natalie will continue to work on the promulgation of the fourth management plan and on preparing the fifth management plan for all the active management areas. And Kyle Miller will basically perform all of the other AMA functions. So they are both up-and-coming stars in the water management world. And so we are lucky to have them, and we will move forward with them running our AMAs out into the future. So with that, the next report we have up is from Wade Noble, and he will give us a report on the long-term water augmentation committee activities. Wade, take it away.
Thank you, Director Buchowski, and I understand this meeting is recorded, so I want to be clear on the record. Thank you, Director Buchowski. As we also want to appreciate other staff members at the ADWR, including Carol Ward and Zach Richards. We wish Cynthia Rule best of everything wherever she's gone to, disappeared, but we will miss her somewhat. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee has met twice since we last updated the Council. In May, the committee heard detailed presentations on 3 additional augmentation options that we had committed to research further. Chuck Collum presented information on weather modification, Marcos Robles and Bruce Hallen presented information on forest management, and Sarah Porter addressed phreatophyte management. Our presenters provided excellent summaries of these presentations as well as additional resources for committee members to review. We reconvened on August 19 to review each of the options again briefly and discuss them at some length. The committee decided that while forest management is critically important to water management efforts as an augmentation option, it is more difficult to recommend. The committee felt that it was important to allow Bruce Hallen of SRP a few minutes of today's report to summarize what they arrived at regarding forest management, and I'll have him do that momentarily. The committee feels weather modification merits attention, and we do have a request for the Council to consider later in this report. Finally, the committee plans to continue researching phreatophyte management further, bringing in first-hand experts to answer questions and provide perspective. At this time, if Bruce is on this meeting, I'd like to turn it over to Bruce Hallen for a few minutes to share with you the committee's findings on forest management.
Thank you, Wade. This is Bruce Hallen with the project, and I'd also like to thank Marcos Robles and Scott Denny for the work that they've done on this forest management piece. If we could bring up the presentation, Zach. I just have a few slides here. I'll give you a little bit of background on forest restoration. Many of you are very familiar with this issue. So if we could go to the next, well, thank you for that slide. As you know, forest restoration remains a major challenge facing the state of Arizona, and high-severity fires can substantially reduce water quality, damage or reduce the effectiveness of our water infrastructure. That can result in costly delays, repairs, and rehab. And through these large catastrophic wildfires, it potentially can convert forests to vegetation types that produce less spring flow. And a great example of that is in the Dude Fire. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that area, but a fire that occurred in 1990. You go to that area and the replacement vegetation is much, much different than what was there beforehand. In addition to that, we have increased sedimentation that we're seeing in reservoirs that could prematurely decrease the storage capacity in those reservoirs, reducing the resiliency of the water supply, and that's extremely important during drought periods. We're also seeing impact of water infrastructure and power infrastructure. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but the Salt Fire a few weeks back, essentially we had to de-energize a major large transmission line, and it's not due to the fire, but it's due to smoke and the impact of smoke when it comes to those transmission lines, and we see some arcing due to smoke. And so that typically occurs, it's not during a low demand period for power, it's going to occur during a peak period when you have a lot of demand on the system. And so we had to de-energize the transmission line and ask our end-use customers to reduce their power usage due to the imbalance on supply and demand on the system. But there's also increasing costs to treat the water, and runoff from wildfires has degraded the supply in a few instances to the point where it was really untreatable. And you can see an example of that here on this slide on the far right. That's a water sample at Val Vista, and they couldn't treat that water supply just because of the quality associated with the supply. And so it's really beyond water, but more importantly, there are other potential impacts that include communities, recreational values, fisheries, and, God forbid, the potential loss of life. So if we could go to the next slide. There are current efforts in Arizona to accelerate forest restoration, including, in particular, the Forest Restoration Initiative, which is designed to reduce the severity of wildfires and the associated adverse impact on the landscape, communities, and the watershed. In particular, to protect wildlife and habitat, lives and property, recreation, protect water and power infrastructure, but in addition to that, also provide and support the forest products industry and create jobs in rural Arizona. Albeit, we all know that this is moving too slowly. There are some current RFP bids under review by the Forest Service that are anticipated to attract needed capital investment to substantially accelerate restoration progress. We do know that will take a couple of years before the forest products industry is in place. So consequently, we are, together with a wide variety of interests, including the state, are watching this process very, very closely on the progress, and we all understand that we can't afford for this process to fail. I will say that recent research getting back to water and on the water side of forest restoration impacts on the watersheds. Recent research conducted in Arizona watersheds indicates that restoration through tree thinning can result in small gains in stream flow production on the order of 1 to 8%. This research, though, is not only based on simulation models, but any potential gains are very short-lived due to regrowth of vegetation as it diminishes any of those gains over the years. Plus, it is very difficult to determine where and if those gains ever make it to the stream. For example, over SRP's period of record, where we have been monitoring and measuring stream flow and precipitation well over 100 years, we have not found any appreciable differences in runoff due to changing forest conditions. We are thinking that each year the weather pattern, so it's the extent of snow cover, those precipitation events, have a tendency to overshadow any of those appreciable increases in production due to restoration. But however, and if we could go to the next slide, we do realize we need to better understand those differences and gains in the water system due to restoration, where those gains occur, and the longevity of any of those gains. So SRP, in partnership with ASU, the Nature Conservancy, and others, has initiated additional analysis to better determine the impact of forest restoration on the watersheds, and I like to use the term water balance. So what kind of impact does it have overall within a watershed on the overall water balance? In other words, how much water is within that watershed itself? So we've been collecting data in select sub-watersheds that are scheduled for thinning in the next few years. Through the use of our photography and snowtography, we've been collecting stream flow, snow coverage, soil moisture, and precipitation data over close to 10 years to provide some level of understanding of hydrologic patterns pre-restoration. In addition to that, through the use of LIDAR technology, we recently acquired a significant amount of data on the characterization of the forest structure, including number, size, type, and basal area coverage of the trees. So in partnership with ASU researchers, using the high resolution imagery from LIDAR and on-the-ground data that we've been collecting over the last 10 years, we will be simulating the water budgets for 6 watersheds within the Sycamore Creek watershed through the use of a distributed hydrologic model. And we anticipate to have results from this model in the spring of 2021. We anticipate that this model will provide us a much more accurate indication of gains to the water balance, especially within those 6 sub-watersheds, post-forest restoration. We're also doing a similar analysis on the East Clear Creek watersheds that feed the Cragen Reservoir. So following that analysis and that work with ASU, we would be happy to report back to the committee once we receive those results, the results of this work from ASU, and to provide you some of the thoughts and on what we learned and what we gained through this modeling effort at Sycamore and at the Cragen watersheds. So with that, Wade, I'll end my comments there, and I don't know if you want me to take any questions now or if you just rather wait till the end of your presentation.
Why don't we go ahead and take questions now if anyone has them for Bruce? Bruce, why don't you take the next slide as well? SRP has been working in partnership with White Mountain Apache Tribe, ADWR, and is seeking contributions from others to help fund a study to better understand the feasibility and efficacy of cloud seeding in the White Mountains. The Desert Research Institute, DRI, has been awarded the contract to answer several important questions leading to the potential to conduct cloud seeding over the White Mountains. Bruce, take it from there, would you please?
Yes, we've worked together with the White Mountain Apache Tribe. This is the first time that any cloud seeding research has been done in the White Mountains. For those of you that are familiar with Arizona, the White Mountains have a significant amount of acreage and lands that are over 8,000 feet in elevation. And so we're working together with the Desert Research Institute, who will be moving forward with the contract. And they'll be essentially answering several important questions leading to the potential to conduct cloud seeding in the White Mountains. The study will commence once we receive additional partnership funding. And so we're asking for others that are interested in this project. We are currently partnering together with DWR, but we're also requesting others, if they are interested in partnering together with us and helping to fund this study, to contact me. And we're hoping that we'll get enough funding available by the end of calendar year 2020 to begin this study and initiate the work with the Desert Research Institute.
Director, how can we find out if there are those on the council who would be willing to participate in this particular project?
So, Wade, we would be happy if the first place to land for any council members is with us here at DWR, and we would then send that information off to Silver Project, and they could follow up with anybody that wants to participate. DWR is participating, as we said, and DWR CAP participated in helping to fund a study up in Wyoming on Colorado River watershed, and if I remember correctly, resulted in a rigorous analysis from an academic standpoint, and I think Desert Research Institute was involved there too. And the conclusion was they were increasing the snowpack by 8%, if my mind remembers that number properly. So it's very important that we follow on within our own state very different watersheds in the Colorado River.
Thank you very much. Let's have the next slide. One of the subcommittees we have is the Water Storage Sites Criteria Subcommittee, in attempting to address the possibility of finding other water storage sites other than those in the previous report that we had done years ago. This subcommittee was formed as a technical working group to recommend site selection criteria for revision of the 2017 report entitled Potential Water Storage Sites on State Trust Land as required by SB 1399. Based on the selection criteria recommended, the number of potential sites in the report may be expanded. The subcommittee has met once since we last reported to the council. The subcommittee reviewed the initial report, process, sites, and criteria. The subcommittee also identified 6 basins, or AMAs, that would benefit from water storage. The subcommittee has tasked ADWR staff with selecting potential storage sites within those basins and evaluating them for common attributes or features. It is expected that the subcommittee is going to get back together to discuss the results. And I think it's your turn, Mr. Director, to thank me. I know.
Well, I guess I can do that, Wade. Thank you for the record. I also want to say before we leave this item, Wade, that Cindy Rule moved over into a position in the AMA. There's always dominoes moving people around within our department, but that is where she is. She's still with the department.
Director, she was capably replaced, but we will miss her.
So, in the bigger scheme of things, for council members, are there any questions for Wade or Bruce on any of their presentations before we move on? Hearing none, we will move on to a report from the non-AMA Groundwater Committee. The co-chairs are Representative Gail Griffin and Jamie Kelly. I'm not sure, Representative Griffin and Jamie, if you both are presenting or one or the other. So whoever is up first can unmute and take it away.
This is Jamie Kelly. Co-Chair Griffin, would you like to present the report?
No, go ahead. I emailed you back and go ahead and present it. I presented this last time, so.
Okay, I didn't see the email. Thank you. Good morning, council members. The non-AMA Groundwater Committee has not met since it last reported to the council. Staff is looking to schedule the next meeting the end of October, the first part of November. At that meeting, as directed by the council chair at the last council meeting, the non-AMA Groundwater Committee will take up the topic of irrigation non-expansion areas. The department will be presenting information on the irrigation non-expansion areas to ensure that all committee members understand what they are and how the vehicle works, and that council members will have the opportunity to make inquiries of staff. And that would be the report.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Representative Griffin, for chairing this committee. We'll look forward to hearing more about your work in future meetings. Representative Griffin, we had a lot of feedback. We didn't hear what you said, at least in our room.
Okay, some of the recommendations that were made in the committee, we did not have consensus on, but those issues will be looked at as well. And so we look forward to participation in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Griffin. So we will move on then to the next report. It's from the Desalination Committee, and the Chair, Phil Richards, will give a quick report for us.
Yeah, thank you, Director. Good morning, everyone. The Desalination Committee has not met in a while. However, the Regulatory and Legal Subcommittee, chaired by Scott Miller, has been working diligently and should have a summary to present to the committee soon. Therefore, we're looking at dates for the next DSAL committee meeting. And right now we're looking at the work that needs to be done in the upcoming holidays. We're considering January 12th at 10 a.m. for our next committee meeting. We'll prepare an agenda and distribute it ahead of that meeting. And that's all I have to report out at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. So we are done with all of the committee updates. We'll move on to agenda item number 3. And I will discuss at a very high level issues regarding the Lake Powell Pipeline project in Utah. I'm really doing this because this has been in the news recently. We're not asking the council for any action or participation in this Lake Powell Pipeline issue. But again, because it's been in the newspapers and in the media over the last week or so, I felt it was important to let people know what's going on. So Utah would like to build a project from Lake Powell to the St. George area in Utah to move 86,000 acre-feet of Utah's upper basin entitlement water. September 8th was the deadline for comments to the draft environmental impact statement. And as a result of that environmental impact statement process, 6 states, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, California, Nevada, and Arizona, sent a letter to Secretary of the Interior Bernhardt asking that the final EIS or the record of decision not be finalized by the Secretary, because we have concerns over legal issues and operational issues related to the 1922 compact between all 7 states and the 1948 Upper Basin compact between the Upper Basin states. We want an opportunity among the states to work with Utah to potentially address these legal and operational issues in a way that would follow on with the collaborative process we've been following for the last 20 plus years on the Colorado River. We have concerns that litigation over the environmental impact statement and the ROD can lead to some litigation that could have serious impacts because of the legal issues related to both of the compacts. So we have obviously not heard back yet from the Secretary in relation to our letter, which was sent pretty much at the close of business on September 8th. But we are waiting to hear back from the Secretary. We are continuing to talk with Utah and with all of the 7 states, our partners that signed the letter. So that is my report. I would be happy to answer brief questions or give more information if warranted. So I'll now turn that over to council members at this point. So not hearing any council members, we'll move on to agenda item 4, management plan update from Natalie Mass with ADWR, and Natalie's doing this remotely, so hopefully this will work smoothly.
Yeah.
Natalie, you're up.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you, members of the council. My name is Natalie Mass, and I am the AMA Director responsible for management plans at ADWR. Today I'm going to cover some updates regarding the 4th and 5th management plans processes and how we've been working to facilitate engagement and feedback despite our challenging circumstances. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Zach. Thank you. I'm going to start with updates on the 4th management plans. Over the course of the last year, I have presented to the council and in other public meetings regarding the incremental adjustments that were proposed for the remaining 4 MPs. In response to stakeholder feedback that we've heard both here in GUAC meetings and in other discussions, we did make some revisions to the original proposal, but are largely moving forward with those changes to the remaining 4th management plan. If we could go to the next slide, please. I've shown this slide to the council before, so I won't spend too much time here. The message of this slide stays the same, though. In 2019, ADWR dedicated staff to working on the management plans, and our first task was to assess the status of the plans and create a work plan for completing the remaining 4th management plan. This timeline that you see on the screen was a result of those initial discussions with the director and with AMA staff, and was designed to be an aggressive but realistic timeline with an ultimate goal of the 5 MP conservation programs going into effect in 2025. In order to reach that, we set a goal to complete the remaining 4th management plan by the end of 2020, and I am very happy to report that we are on track to meet that goal despite some delays due to COVID-related considerations. Next slide, please. The Phoenix AMA 4th management plan was adopted in March. The hearing for the Pinal AMA 4th management plan was on August 20th, and the summary and findings from that hearing will be published no later than September 21st. The hearing for the Santa Cruz AMA 4th management plan is scheduled for September 22nd, and information on that hearing can be found on the public meetings calendar on ADWR's website and on the management plans page on ADWR's website. If we could go to the next slide, please. Concurrently, while working through the source management plans update and adoption process, we have been conducting an ADWR-led stakeholder process for the development of the risk management plans, as you have heard previously and as you saw on an earlier slide. Many of you have also participated in some way in that 5MP process, so thank you for that, and I apologize if any of this information is a repeat for you. Next slide, please. We do recognize that all of these timelines feel a little bit more tenuous right now, but so far this FIST management plan's timeline has remained in place, which is to say that we are still working toward that same goal of having the conservation programs in the FIST management plan become effective in 2025. Next slide, please. In order to achieve that, we are hoping to largely wrap up the work group and the development phase of the 5MPs by the end of this year, although we recognize that a number of the discussions will spill over into the next year, and that meetings for updates and reviews of draft language will be helpful throughout the drafting process. Our plan, though, is to take much of 2021 to draft those 5 FIST management plans, so that those plans can all be adopted in 2022, and so that the conservation programs in those plans can become effective on January 1st, 2025. Next slide, please. When we first began the process for the FIST management plans, we established the goals and the steps that you see on the slide, and we have been working through these steps. From the first meeting of the 5MP work group in July of 2019 to the present, we worked through the background of each sector's data and existing conservation programs, and have recently moved into more discussions of policy to further develop the ideas that we've heard on those existing programs and potential new conservation programs. We began this process with in-person meetings, meeting people, shaking hands, and having side conversations before and after the meeting. We recognize that the limitations of our present situation feel very far from that. However, in order to meet that 2025 target, those conversations will need to continue progressing, and there is not time to delay. We have had 25 meetings so far under the umbrella of this work group since July 2019, and we will continue to have public meetings to work together through these important issues. Next slide, please. We do recognize, however, that the online format can be challenging for having these conversations. So we have been working very hard to adjust and improve our meeting and communication methods since we moved to online meeting format in response to these COVID-related requirements in April. Additionally, we have continually requested feedback and are open to further adjusting these methods if there are ways that we can better facilitate these conversations. Next slide, please. From the beginning, the work group was intended to be a stakeholder forum and an opportunity for collaborative idea sharing and feedback on this conservation program. We still intend for that to be the case, and as we move further along in that process, those ideas and that input are even more critical. As such, we have been working hard to consider our meeting format to be responsive to questions and requests, and to be communicative and transparent as we work through these issues. We've been adjusting our meeting methods as we go, like many others. We're still figuring out best practices for online meetings, and we are attempting to adjust where we hear suggestions or see issues that we are able to correct. One way we've been adjusting, particularly as we move into this program development phase, is through repetition. Many of you will have heard me repeat that our guiding principle for the development of the conservation programs is the reductions of withdrawals of groundwater. But we've also built that repetition into the structure of our meeting. Each meeting begins with a quick view of where we've been, and each meeting ends with a quick view of where we're going. When we introduce new proposals, we often first mention the concept, then detail the concept at the next meeting, then allow time for additional questions or development at the meeting after that. This allows space for people to reach out to us with questions, to refer back to the presentation, to confer with their colleagues, and to generally digest the proposal. But also allows us to continue progressing forward in those conversations and in the development of these programs. We've also began adding in timers for pauses in our meetings. We know that dead air in these meetings can be kind of awkward, and the use of these timers allows for a predictable but brief pause in our presentations to allow time for people to formulate questions and either type them in the chat box or ask their comments. We've also begun developing questionnaires for each meeting, allowing still more methods and more space for people to consider these issues and easily make their voices heard. We've already heard feedback about these working well for people either with more complex issues or where they wanted to discuss the response with their broader organization. Additionally, we have always accepted and encouraged any questions or comments at managementplans@azwater.gov, our email address. If we could go to the next slide, please. This next item is something fairly new and something we are very proud to be able to share with all of you. We recently published a 5MP concepts webpage intended to be a one-stop shop for each concept or proposal being discussed. The intent of this page was to put all of the information in one place to make it easier for someone to get caught up or to find information on a given concept or to see what others have said about a given concept. For each sector, the various concepts are detailed, including a short description, links to and descriptions of any meetings where that concept was discussed, any relevant graphics, data, or dashboards, and any stakeholder comments that have been received. Next slide, please. In these various sections, we have also worked to make information as accessible and interactive as possible. In addition to links to specific meetings and recordings, we have tools like a calculator for golf courses to estimate their new allotment under the 5MP proposal for golf courses, or interactive dashboards to explore what specific proposals or even broader concepts like base yield might look like for each AMA. Next slide, please. We have made a lot of progress, and these tools and methods that I've covered today have been a big part of that. But the stakeholders and their willingness to put thought into these important issues and to develop concepts to help continue Arizona's culture of conservation in all three sectors, that has really been the most critical component of the significant progress that we've made on the 6th management plan. We do have a number of upcoming meetings that you can see on the screen here, our next being a Seafield Technical Subgroup meeting on September 30th. We would welcome any of you at any of these meetings, and we do look forward to continuing to make progress on the 5th management plan. Next slide, please. Oh, and you can just skip this slide. Thank you. With that, I'd like to thank both the ADWR staff and the stakeholders who have put so much work into all the things we've accomplished up to this point. This really is all very much a team effort. And I would also like to thank you all for your time and attention today, and I would gladly take any questions or comments from the council at this time.
Questions or comments from council members for Natalie?
Natalie, this is Rusty. The services that you've described, for example, the golf course evaluation tool, etc., those are available for everybody. I mean, without cost? How accessible easily?
Yes, those are all available without cost. That's a service that I and my staff have provided and put on ADWR's website. So I think in one of the slides, the 5MP Concepts webpage link was available, and there's a spreadsheet available for that calculator. There are interactive dashboards on there. It's all publicly available on our website. Yes.
Because I heard that Tom wanted to stick like, a quarter of a share of water for each use or something that we'd be able to get. Because I think those will be absolutely wonderful as tools. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
So Stephanie Smallhouse, we saw your name pop up. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you, Director Buchowski. Yeah, I just had a question for Natalie. Natalie, you mentioned earlier in your presentation that there have been some changes to the forest management plan based upon feedback that you received. And I know that agriculture has provided quite a bit of feedback. So could you explain whether any of those changes that have been made were based upon that feedback and specifically what those changes are?
Sure. So our original proposal to the changes for the forest management plans, oh goodness, sorry, I'm going to have to think back a little bit here. So our original changes were proposed around July of last year. We had a number of public meetings at that time and received a number of comments from people across the AMAs. In response to those comments, we made some edits to some of the BMP language in the forest management plans, in those remaining forest management plans. We made some edits to the non-per capita program for municipal, for those remaining forest management plans, and we also made some updates to how the golf course allotments were calculated for those remaining forest management plans. I would have to go back and follow up with you if you wanted something more specific than that. But there were extensive revisions made in response to a number of those comments that we had received.
And then a follow-up question, if I may, Director.
Go ahead.
Okay. I guess I'm just sort of, I sit in on either most of the risk management plans webinars, or I've gone back and reviewed all of them. And I guess I'm a little surprised because I assume that when issues and concerns are brought up in those subgroup committee meetings, that we might hear in your report, Natalie, what those concerns are so that the council stays abreast of kind of what those concerns are. And I think we didn't really hear any of those concerns at the last council meeting in your report. And I thought we might hear some of them during this council meeting. And I guess I just sort of consider that as part of the engagement process, is letting the greater council kind of know what the feeling of the subcommittee is in terms of those concerns. Otherwise, unless you're attending those meetings, and I guess this would apply to all subcommittee meetings, unless you're attending those meetings, you don't really have a feel as a member of the council how those meetings are actually progressing and what the concerns are. I feel like that's helpful to the greater council.
Sure. Thank you, Stephanie. I will say we recognize that these conversations are difficult. They're certainly not without controversy. So we have had some hard discussions in all of our subgroups, not necessarily just the agricultural one, but municipal and industrial as well. We are working toward creating updated programs in all of these sectors, including agriculture. And we are continuing to work with the stakeholders to find a path forward. I guess to your point of providing some of those concerns to the council, at this point we're still working with stakeholders in building those programs to address some of those concerns. So I guess I perhaps didn't include those in the update at this point because we do still hope to be able to resolve some of those concerns through the process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other council members? Warren Kenny? Warren, go ahead.
Thank you, Tom. I just wanted to say that we have appreciated the interaction and the working with Natalie and her staff on the management plan, particularly the fifth management plan. We view the fifth management plan as very important because we're not sure how long it will be in place, whether there'll be a sixth management plan or not. That's something the post-2025 AMA committee is trying to work on also. So in the meantime, we recognize the importance of the fifth management plan. We've appreciated being asked for ideas, for feedback, for input, even proposals. And we've appreciated that opportunity to do that. We also appreciate when we hear back from the department specific ideas or directions that the department wants to go. And I just wanted to, again, voice appreciation for being able to have this exchange and interaction of ideas during the fifth management plan process, and appreciate working with DWR staff on that. So thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Warren. Any other council members like to weigh in before we move on? I can fuck up the tape.
Ditto Warren's comment. Says thank you, Natalie, for the work.
So hearing none, seeing none, we will... Who?
Sandy.
Sorry, Sandy Favorites? Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Going back to Stephanie's comments and sort of looking at whether or not, the issues are going to be brought forward to the council. I am assuming, and just correct me if I'm wrong, that if an individual council member has issues that they want to bring to this council regarding anything that's being discussed in the management plan meeting, rather than staff bringing back all the issues, we can bring those to the council, correct?
You can bring up those issues for discussion, yes, Sandy. Okay. And I agree that rather than trying to recount various stakeholders' concerns, which often are expressed throughout the process in either way, I think what you suggested might be a better way to deal with some of these issues for input. Although I will say, given that the council only meets quarterly, to actually participate, raise those concerns in the process that Natalie has outlined would probably be a more timely way to raise the issues and get answers. But certainly in these quarterly meetings we can have some discussion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? I'll do a little pause here.
Director, this is Representative Griffin.
Yes, Representative Griffin.
Thank you. Natalie, could you send me I don't know, not a white paper, but identify the issues that the ag community has and respond to each one of those and get that to me? I'd appreciate that.
I will discuss that with the director and we'll get for you.
Director,
Representative Griffin.
Yes.
Representative Griffin, we will try to compile what we have, and we will probably try to do it in a way that, first of all, doesn't attribute directly to any one person. I think it's always better to do that, and we might have to group some comments together, but it might take some time for us to go back through all the records, but we'll try to do the best we can to get you the information you're asking for.
Director and Natalie, I think they have a letter that they sent, so that in particular is what I'm speaking of. If you could address those issues and what plan to resolve those issues would be appreciative.
So Representative Griffin, I am working on a response to the letter.
Okay.
Once that response will go to all of the folks who signed the letter and to all of the CCs on the letter. And then after folks have a chance to read the letter, we will consider having the face-to-face meeting requested in that letter.
Thank you. Would you include me in that response?
Yes, I believe, if I remember correctly, you were CC'd on the letter, so yes.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else?
Mr. Carlos Ronstadt just wanted to comment that ADWR and Natalie are have done an amazing job on both the fourth and fifth master plans. I didn't always agree with AWR on the issues, but he's very amazing.
Okay, any members of the council? All right, we will move on then to the next agenda item, the Arizona Reconsultation Committee. Again, this is an item for information. Many of you on the council are also members of the committee. This committee is a follow-on to the Arizona Drought Contingency Steering Committee, co-chaired by General Manager of CAP Ted Cook and myself. This committee and its processes are a way for us to balance the transparency that is needed moving forward with the confidentiality that's needed moving forward as the state of Arizona negotiates and looks at how the Colorado River managed after the post-7 guidelines and the drought contingency plan expire in 2026. So we wanted to go through, for those of you who have not been involved in the committee or in the first meeting of the committee, and give you some background about this process that we're now calling the Arizona Reconsultation Committee, or the ARC. Next slide. So this is an estimate of the reconsultation process and timeline that was put together by CAP and DWR. Reclamation is really going to be running this process for the reconsultation. It will be a NEPA process, and it has not yet launched, but Ken and I thought it was important to give folks an estimate of where we saw this potentially going. And I want to start on the left-hand part of the slide in the 2020 time frame, and it says BOR 7D review. That 7D review is a review of the effectiveness of the 2007 guidelines and the drought contingency plan. Reclamation is doing a report. That report will be shared with stakeholder groups for their comments, and was going to be, I think, daylighted at Colorado Water Users Association meeting in December. That meeting has been canceled. There won't be a virtual meeting either, so we'll hear from Reclamation at some future point about when they might be daylighting that report, since Pruitt is now canceled. If we go down to the bottom bar, the orange, again, that is the Arizona Reconsultation Committee process. Again, hopefully forming an intra-Arizona consensus, and you can see that rolls up into hopefully a record of decision in the 2025-2026 timeframe, and potential federal legislation that may be necessary, as it was necessary for the drought contingency plan. In the middle, and you can see the Reconsultation Committee rolls up into the green bar as well. That is an anticipated basin state process. We hope with the basin states, all 7 states, to create an alternative for the NEPA process, and we hope that that alternative would eventually be the preferred alternative chosen by the Bureau of Reclamation. We also anticipate reaching out to other stakeholder groups as the basin states put together a potential alternative. NGOs, from tribal entities outside of Arizona. We have tribal participation within Arizona. But to try to build up as much support as possible. And of course, we will be dealing with the Republic of Mexico as well in this entire process. And you can see this rolls up into the reclamation's reconsultation process, the NEPA process. So we can move to the next slide. So this has animation giving a little bit more detail for the ARC process. So down at the bottom, again, is the ARC committee, diverse group of stakeholders, as you can see on the screen. And again, repeating the important lesson we learned in the Drought Contingency Plan Steering Committee, the value of having direct participation by our elected officials here in the state of Arizona, which again was a key to the successful conclusion and adoption of the Arizona legislative package for the Drought Contingency Plan, passed and signed on January 31st, 2019. You can hit the button. So we also recognize the need for work groups within the ARC process, and you can see we are going to have a technical work group, and we have a little bit more information on slides subsequent to this one about that work group, so I won't go into it. But again, this work group is really about modeling and testing various alternatives in terms of how they might impact the river, and of course how they might impact Arizona and its water uses. The next slide. And then an Arizona strategy team. This strategy team will be a very small sector of delegate representatives, and it really is intended to be folks with expertise legally and from the policy side. We recognize in this work group the need for confidentiality so we can assess alternatives against potential legal positions and not daylight those legal positions to anyone else outside of the strategy team. There will be an opportunity, obviously, for both of these work groups to go back and consult through the ARC process. The strategy team, again, will have some more detail in future slides, so let's move on to the next slide. Again, at the top of the pyramid, so to speak, are the discussions that will occur among the basin states, looking at a possible alternatives. And as we did in the Drought Contingency Plan itself, the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan, I anticipate that I will be working along with Ted Cook, with the basin states. We certainly recognize and anticipate perhaps another stakeholder or two or three being part of the Arizona team that will work with the basin states, and we will identify those folks as this process moves forward. So the next slide, please. Keep going. And again, as we talked about in the timeline, all of this feeding into the basin state process and the reclamation process and potential record of decision and federal legislation. Go ahead, Zach, please. So one of the very key functions of the ARC is to adopt what we're calling, at this point, draft guiding principles. This really will help the Arizona negotiating team understand and have the support of the stakeholders within the state as we move through the basin state process and through the federal process. And I do want to go through these one by one. So first, many of these are similar to some of the principles we adhere to in the steering committee process for the Drought Contingency Plan itself. So first, respecting the existing law of the river, including existing rights, contracts, and priorities. We are not throwing out the law of the river and starting all over again, although we've heard that from some stakeholder groups throughout the basin over the last year and a half since we got DCP done. We will seek basin-wide solutions with burden shared across the basin, not just by Arizona. We will focus on long-term sustainability, including addressing the structural deficit, recognizing that conservation and supply augmentation are part of a long-term solution. Again, the structural deficit being about 1.2 million acre feet, on average coming out of Lake Mead as compared to what goes into Lake Mead from Lake Powell. We recognize that Arizona tribes are a vital component within the Arizona discussion. They have about half the CDP water, they have about half of Arizona's Colorado River water. And Ted and I offered to the Bureau of Reclamation to work with them for tribal outreach. And there will be a process in which tribal discussions with Reclamation will create an opportunity for those tribes to interact directly with Ted and I. And we have, obviously, some tribal members on the ARC itself. Continuing to collaborate with Mexico as part of the process, I guess it's self-evident. And then no marketing of unused water by anyone, tribal or non-tribal, and no marketing of Arizona water, again, tribal or non-tribal, outside of the state of Arizona. And again, the importance of our Arizona legislative leaders to continue to be part of the discussion. So we anticipate that this list might grow. I don't think we anticipate that this list is going to shrink from what you see here. So next slide. So we also have preliminarily identified initial key issues. These really came out of listening sessions that Ted, Cook, and I did from about October to February or so. We reached out to every single delegate from the steering committee to get their views about that process, but also what issues they might want to raise moving forward in the ARC process. Some of these issues might move into guiding principles, and certainly this list we expect to expand with input from ARC members, ARC delegates. So we want to balance the need for certainty with the need for flexibility to address the changing conditions and circumstances. So the 2007 guidelines weren't very adaptive, and we had to create the drought contingency plan as we saw that the 2007 guidelines were not enough to protect Lake Mead the way we thought they were in the mid-2000s. We want to build that adaptive management into the next set of guidelines, so to speak. There are differing perspectives on mitigation for the next set of guidelines post-2026. Again, we had an Arizona implementation plan that had mitigation for Arizona water users who were incrementally impacted by the addition of the drought contingency plan as compared to the 2007 guidelines. At least from my perspective and my marching orders from the executive, and we sent this message in the implementation plan process, you do not see that the state of Arizona is going to offer up mitigation post-2026. The cuts will fall upon the water users in order of priority. But we know that other folks believe mitigation still should be on the table, and that's why we have this bullet written the way we do. We need more discussion about that moving forward. We will consider balancing perspectives on intentionally created surplus storage and releases to avoid interstate impacts to priorities and users. So much of what has occurred since we incorporated DCP into the mix in terms of storage in Lake Mead, keeping us out of deeper cuts, has been intentionally created storage creation. Some folks believe that more system conservation should be created rather than intentionally created surplus, which again can come out of the lake under the drought contingency plan and the 07 guidelines, with some restrictions at different elevations. So a key balancing act there as we move forward. And again, the last bullet on this list the desire to discuss the role and opportunities for senior priority users to offer water to junior priority users. So while I don't see a Arizona mitigation plan per se, there will be opportunities for senior priority water users to help the junior priority water users, just as we have seen in DCP implementation, where some folks are storing some of their Colorado River water with agricultural entities whose CAP water is being cut. And that is a kind of a business deal, and we see those perhaps helping those junior priority users out into the future. So again, we're going to be taking more input from ARC members to expand this list and flesh out each one of these issues. So can we move to the next slide? So again, the reconsultation will be technical and of course, as all things water are, complicated. We'll need modeling, policy, and legal analyses to help us along. We have the two committees stood up to do that. We need to consider multiple scenarios and explore different proposals for new operations from our perspective, Arizona's perspective, as a starting point. We need the ability to conduct confidential discussions regarding our strategy and the policy and legal risks, as we talked about with the strategy team. So again, the modeling and analysis work group is co-chaired again by DWR and CWCB tech staff, and the Arizona strategy team to be co-chaired by DWR and CWCB. Can you go to the next slide? So a little bit more about the modeling and analyses work group. We'll address questions and examinations from the ARC group, provide fact-based information to inform the ARC. We'll examine the risks, vulnerabilities, and impacts to our Colorado River supply, our on-river users, and our CAP users and their priorities. We will consider a broad range of future conditions. All ARC members and alternates are invited to attend and participate. We're not recording these meetings, and non-members of the ARC are welcome to come to those meetings as well. So here's an opportunity for more public participation in this work group. And if you like to look at squiggly lines on a screen, this is the group for you. Next, the strategy team. Again, we need confidentiality here to examine negotiating strategies in dealing with the basin states and in the federal process, and the potential legal implications of any new operating rules or alternatives put forth by other entities. That participation does require an invitation and the signing of a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement. We'll be meeting as necessary, and we've identified some potential members, but we're not far enough down the line with those members yet in terms of their ability to participate, so we're not going to announce their names quite yet. So the next slide. Here is a recounting of the ARC schedule and the schedule moving forward. We did have our first meeting on June 25th. On July 30th, the modeling and analysis work group met. Benita Carta from my staff and Chuck Hull from CAP are the co-chairs. Again, they are modeling group gurus, among other things. That's why we chose them. The Arizona strategy team hasn't convened yet, but Patrick Dent from CAP and Clint Channels and are reaching out to talk to potential members of that team. And we recently sent out a draft of the non-disclosure agreement for comment by those entities who we have invited onto the team. In a couple of days, we're having the next ARC meeting, September 17th. There is the draft agenda, very similar to the agenda for the first ARC meeting. We'll have a Colorado River update from Reclamation, a report on the DCP implementation for 2021 and 2020 and 2021. Reclamation will give us an update on their 7D review process. We're going to discuss more about the process goals, responsibilities, sideboards, etc. for the ARC itself. We'll get report outs from the 2 work groups. We'll have a continued discussion of the initial guiding principles and issues, and then be talking about the next ARC meeting, maybe sometime late this year, early next year for the next meeting. So I have covered quite a bit of information. Again, a lot of this is probably familiar to a lot of the folks on the council, but we thought it would be a good time to update the council on the doings of the ARC. So with that, I will open it up to questions and comments from council members, and if we need to go back, I'll ask Zach to go back to the big flyers because that's what's needed to help explain or answer questions. So I'll turn it over now to council members. In the chat boxes. So we're seeing nothing in the chat box, and I'm not hearing anybody at the council. So with that, we do have, I believe, some time to allow members of the public, non-council members, to ask questions about anything on the agenda. Please keep it to items on the agenda. So members of the public, non-members of the council, any questions or comments for us?
There's a comment in the chat box by a non-member.
Who?
James Fortney.
Who?
James Fortney.
So we have a James Fortney, if I hopefully have that name right. Would like to make a comment. Can you unmute yourself, please, and address the council?
James, if you're having trouble unmuting yourself, I can just read the comment in the chat box. Encouraging folks reference the fourth management plan comments and revisions. Ms. Mass indicated that certain issues have resulted in the development of programs, quote-unquote programs, suggests that corrective action steps have been identified as appropriate if AWR is developing programs to improve the fourth management plan. James suggests the efforts need to be fully reported to stakeholders and the public.
So James, I believe, as Natalie said, that all of this is available on the DWR website. Those things that are new in the management plans and the new conservation requirements in all the sectors. I believe that's largely what Natalie was referring to when she talks about the programs. She also went through in detail the tools on our website, and I'll let Natalie add to what I just said if there's more, or if I got it wrong. So Natalie.
Yes,
would you like to also answer the question? Go ahead.
So the programs that we refer to are the conservation programs that are mandated to be included in the management plans by statute. So when I refer to programs, that's kind of what I mean by that, is those conservation programs. The changes associated with each fourth management plan as compared to the third management plan are outlined in an overview that is posted on our website, on the management plans page of our website, along with those management plans. So hopefully we've answered your question there.
Thanks, Natalie. Any other non-members wanting to address the council on these agenda items? We'll give a little pause here, because I know it takes some time sometimes. not seeing anything. Zach's not seeing anything in the chat box. I am not hearing anyone, so we'll move on. Thank you to all the council members and to the public for taking time to be with us today and go through this meeting agenda. Our next meeting will be December 1st, 2020 from 10 a.m. 12 p.m. I expect that we will still be in the virtual world, but if we are not, we look forward to seeing everyone in person at that meeting. So thank you all, and we are adjourned.